The day they gave him my promotion, I didn't say a word. I just smiled, shook his hand, and watched the man who stole my future celebrate with my team. Using the pitch deck I built. It wasn't the shock that burned me. It was the silence. The kind of silence that creeps in when betrayal comes wearing a suit and a fake smile. My name's Ryan Cole, 34, senior sales strategist at Pipeline Dynamics, a mid-tier B2B software firm that survives on charm, hustle, and blood pressure level stress. For 3 years, I built our client base from scratch: long nights, cold calls, canceled weekends, and quarterly reports that made the regional VP call me the engine of our pipeline. I wasn't arrogant. I was committed. When our sales director resigned, the promotion memo was practically written for me. Everyone knew it. I'd brought in the company's biggest accounts, TechLinks, OptiCloud, Vireo Systems, and nurtured them into million-dollar partnerships. But apparently, everyone didn't include Mark Dalton. Mark was a walking cliché of boardroom favoritism: crisp suits, perfect hair, and the kind of charisma that hides incompetence. 2 years younger, half as capable, but twice as political. He didn't just play the game, he designed it. When he first joined, he called me his mentor. "Ryan, you've got to teach me how you handle those clients," he'd said, notebook open, eyes eager. And like a fool, I did. I shared my tactics, my cold call scripts, my notes on client psychology, everything. Because back then, I believed we were a team. But over the next year, I noticed something, a slow, subtle siphoning. A few of my leads ended up under his name in the CRM. A couple of my prospects got re-signed. When I asked, he laughed it off. "Just internal reshuffling, buddy. Management wants me to learn from your accounts, right? Learn." The worst part? He wasn't even good at hiding it. He'd drop my name in meetings to impress the directors. "Ryan's process is genius, but I've optimized it." Ryan's pitch worked great with OptiCloud, so I tried it with GridTech. And it landed. And management ate it up. I tried to play the long game. Let my work speak louder. But when the whispers started, "Mark's got leadership potential. He's a born closer," I knew the narrative was being rewritten. My story, told in his voice. Still, I held my ground. I had results, numbers, loyalty. That had to count for something. Then came Monday morning. The department gathered in the conference room. The CEO, Mr. Henderson, walked in with that corporate grin. The one that says this is already decided. He cleared his throat. "After careful consideration, we're proud to announce our new sales director, Mark Dalton." Applause. Smiles. Confetti of betrayal. Mark stood up, pretending to be humble. "I'm honored," he said, voice cracking with fake emotion. Then he turned to me, extended his hand. "Couldn't have done it without your mentorship, Ryan." For a second, my vision blurred. I didn't see his hand. I saw the months of strategy he'd stolen, the clients he'd poached, the credit he'd siphoned. I wanted to crush that handshake into dust. But I didn't. I smiled. "Congrats, boss." And the room moved on, while my gut twisted into steel. Pipeline Dynamics wasn't just a company. It was a jungle of numbers. Client portfolios, conversion rates, retention battles. Every dollar meant survival. And if Mark thought a title meant control, he'd just made the worst assumption of his career. Because the real power in sales isn't the corner office. It's the relationships. The pipeline. And every major client still trusted me. Not the polished pretender who'd just stolen my chair. That night, I stayed late. The office lights dimmed, the hum of servers echoing like a heartbeat. I sat at my desk, staring at the CRM dashboard. Rows of client data, every deal I'd built, every connection I owned. I clicked open Mark's new portfolio. He had access to everything now: my work, my clients, my future. But what he didn't know was that every pipeline can be rerouted. I leaned back, smirked, and whispered into the empty room. "You took my promotion, Mark. Let's see how long you can keep your clients." For a few days, I played the part. Smiles in the hallways, polite nods in meetings, congratulatory claps on the back. Everyone thought I was taking the loss like a professional. But inside, every passing, "Congrats, Mark," felt like a paper cut. Small, but slicing deeper every time. He'd stolen the seat that was supposed to be mine. And now, sitting in that glass-walled office, he looked down on me with a kind of subtle arrogance. Not overt. Not yet. Just there. A raised eyebrow when I spoke. A delayed response to my emails. We'll discuss that later. Tone that said, you're beneath me now. It started with a small client call, Rewrote Systems, one of our oldest partners. I'd handled their account since their first contract. They trusted me completely. That Monday, I logged into our CRM, ready to update the renewal forecast. Except the contact file had been transferred. Under account manager, Mark Dalton. At first, I thought it was a glitch, maybe an admin mistake. So, I walked over to his office. He was on the phone, laughing, relaxed. The posture of someone who'd already forgotten who built his foundation. When he hung up, I leaned on the doorframe. Hey Mark. Noticed something weird? Rewrote Systems is showing under your name now. He didn't look surprised. Oh yeah, he said casually. Henderson wants me to manage all high-value renewals directly now. Just standardizing leadership oversight. Right, I said slowly. So my clients, your former clients. Technically. He smiled. But don't worry, buddy. I'll make sure your hard work doesn't go unnoticed. That was the first time I felt it. Not anger, not yet. Just that cold pressure in the chest that says something's wrong. By the second week, the office rhythm had changed. Mark was always on a call. Not with new leads, not with cold prospects, but with my clients. I'd walk past the glass walls, and his door would shut quickly. His voice would drop low, like someone rehearsing a lie. One night, around 80:30, I stayed back to finalize some quarterly data. Mark's light was still on. I could see him pacing, phone to his ear, gesturing animatedly. I was about to leave when I caught my name. Yeah, Ryan's good, but he's been distracted lately. I'll personally handle your renewal. My fingers tightened around my laptop bag. Distracted? I hadn't missed a single deadline, hadn't botched a single deliverable. But I knew what he was doing. Planting seeds. Slowly erasing me from my own relationships. The next all-hands meeting confirmed it. Henderson walked in, clapping his hands. Great news, team. Under Mark's leadership, our renewal rates are up 12% this quarter. Applause. Again. Except every deal on that slide was mine. Every client listed was one I'd cultivated for years. I looked at the data, forcing a neutral expression, but my pulse was hammering. Henderson called my name at the end. Ryan. Your adaptability under Mark's direction has been impressive. Keep it up. Under Mark's direction. It was like watching someone repaint your masterpiece. Then sign their name at the bottom. Later that week, I confronted him. Mark, we need to talk. About the client transfers, the reports, the calls. He leaned back in his chair, hands behind his head. Ryan, relax. You're taking this too personally. These are company decisions. You're telling clients I'm distracted. Am I? Or are you hearing what you want to hear? He said smoothly. Maybe you're just burned out. It happens. There it was. Gaslighting? Corporate edition. He wasn't just stealing credit now. He was rewriting reality, making me question whether the injustice I felt was even real. By the end of the month, I wasn't sleeping much. My phone buzzed with emails at all hours. Mark asked for updates on your pipeline. Mark wants your weekly reports early. Mark needs to review all proposals before submission. He was tightening control, slowly stripping autonomy from the one person who'd actually built the system. At home, my girlfriend, Lena, noticed the change. You're barely here anymore, she said one night. Even when you are, you're somewhere else. I tried to laugh it off. Just work politics. Politics don't keep you up at 3 a.m., Ryan. She was right. But how could I explain it? How could I tell her that watching someone steal your identity in real time felt like dying by 1,000 cuts? The breaking point came during payroll week. My quarterly commission, usually a healthy reflection of my performance, was cut in half. I checked the system. Several deals had been re-signed retroactively to Mark's name before they closed, meaning the company believed he had secured them. When I brought it up to finance, the manager sighed. Mark said those leads came from his strategic redirection. You were just assisting. Assisting. That single word echoed in my head all day. By evening, it had mutated into something darker. If the system was already rewriting history, then I had two options: accept it or start rewriting it myself. That night, I sat in my car outside the office long after everyone left. Rain pattered on the windshield, the kind that makes city lights bleed into the asphalt. Inside, the glow of Mark's office window flickered, still working late, probably charming another one of my clients. I clenched the steering wheel. This wasn't a misunderstanding anymore. It wasn't politics. It was a setup. A slow, methodical erasure of my career. But what Mark didn't realize was this: I had built every connection, every pipeline, every relationship from zero. And if I could build it once, I could rebuild it. Without him. By the start of Q2, pipeline dynamics had changed. The walls seemed thinner, the smiles faker, and my name appeared less and less in client conversations. I wasn't fired, but I was faded. Replaced quietly, like a photo left too long in sunlight. Still, I played along. Did my reports. Sat in meetings. Nodded when Mark spoke like he'd invented every strategy I'd written. But there was something he didn't know. I'd started keeping receipts. Every client email, every CRM log. Every timestamp of when accounts were transferred. Because if there was one thing I'd learned about betrayal, it's that it always leaves fingerprints. One night, after another empty congratulations party for Mark's outstanding leadership, I stayed late again. The office was quiet, just the hum of air conditioning and the blinking cursor on my monitor. I was combing through last quarter's pipeline data when I noticed a pattern. Subtle, but too perfect to be coincidence. Every high-value client I'd onboarded in the past 18 months had been reassigned exactly 48 hours before renewal or upsell. Right when commissions were about to lock. 2 days. Always 2. That's when the pieces clicked. The system didn't do that automatically. Someone manually changed those entries, right before the payout window. And the only person with admin access was Mark. I knew I needed more than suspicion. So, I went to the one person I still trusted. Janelle, our CRM coordinator. She'd seen the chaos firsthand and wasn't blind to what was happening. "Janelle," I said quietly, closing her office door. "Can you check the edit logs for me? For client assignments. Specifically anything under Mark's credentials." She hesitated. "Ryan, that's technically against policy. Please," I said, voice low. "Just look, I need to know if I'm going crazy." She sighed, then tapped a few keys. A list appeared, dozens of entries. Each one marked M. Dalton Action Reassign Account, timestamp 11s and 4:2 p.m., 12s and 3 a.m., 1:15 a.m., night after night. Quiet changes made after hours. Janelle frowned. "He's been logging in at midnight. That's not normal." My stomach sank. "He's been stealing my pipeline. One client at a time." I sat there, staring at the screen, a wave of disbelief washing over me. Every late night, every call, every sacrifice rewritten. My career turned into his RA. It wasn't just theft, it was sabotage. He'd made sure my numbers dropped just enough to justify not promoting me. And the kicker. Those same, underperforming quarters were used in the final decision. Henderson had said it himself. Ryan's performance plateaued. Mark's trending upward. My plateau was his theft in disguise. My hands shook. For a moment I couldn't tell if I wanted to cry or punch through the monitor. Lena's words echoed in my head. "Politics don't keep you up at 3 a.m. She was right. It wasn't politics. It was betrayal, systematic and surgical. I left the office that night without speaking. My body moved on autopilot, but my mind was a storm. The next morning, I confronted him. No theatrics. Just truth. I walked into his office, shut the door, and dropped a folder on his desk. Inside were printouts of the logs, the timestamps, the evidence. He looked up, unbothered. "What's this?" "You tell me," I said. "Because it looks like you've been reassigning my clients before renewals." A flicker of annoyance crossed his face, quickly buried under that corporate smile. "Ryan, that's a serious accusation." "It's not an accusation," I said coldly. "It's proof." He leaned back, smirked. "You're out of line. I'm your superior now. Watch your tone." That word, superior, snapped something inside me. I stepped closer. "You used to call me your mentor. Now you're stealing from me and calling it leadership." He shrugged. "It's not stealing if the company benefits. You just didn't play the game, Ryan. I did. There it was. The mask dropped. No guilt, no remorse. Just pure, polished greed. I went straight to HR the next day, evidence in hand. They listened politely, nodded, smiled, and thanked me for bringing this to their attention. A week later, I got an email. Internal review completed. No policy violations found. After investigation, we found no misconduct in client reassignment procedures. Please direct any further inquiries to your direct supervisor, Mark Dalton. It was a full circle of insult. The system protected its own. And now, he was officially untouchable. That night, sitting alone in my apartment, I felt something shift inside me. The anger wasn't burning anymore. It was cold. Focused. If the system was rigged, I'd stop playing by their rules. For the first time in years, I considered quitting. Just walking away, letting the empire I built rot from within. But then I remembered something. The clients. They weren't loyal to Pipeline Dynamics. They were loyal to me. They called me when there was an issue. They trusted my judgment. They built their pipelines through my strategy. And that's when the idea hit. If Mark could reassign clients on paper, I could reassign loyalty in reality. I opened my laptop, logged into my personal contact list, years of notes, relationships, direct lines, decision makers. Each name represented trust he could never buy. And as I scrolled through them, one by one, I smiled. If Mark wanted to play dirty, I'd play surgical, quiet, invisible, ruthless. He took my promotion. Now I'd take the very foundation he stood on, the pipeline. For weeks, I moved through the office like a ghost. Same desk, same files. Same polite smiles that meant nothing. But something in me had cracked. Or maybe clicked. Because the moment I realized the system wasn't broken, it was designed that way, my grief began to harden into something else. Mark hadn't just stolen a promotion. He'd stolen years of sweat, trust, and identity. And I had let him. The night I found out HR had buried my complaint, I sat in the parking lot long after midnight. Rain hammered the windshield, wipers motionless. I stared at my reflection in the glass. Tired eyes, clenched jaw, and whispered, "You built this place. You made him powerful. You can take it all back." It wasn't rage anymore. It was clarity. The next morning, the company hosted a leadership vision meeting. Mark stood at the front of the room, perfectly lit by the projector glow, outlining his pipeline restructuring strategy. Every word coming out of his mouth was mine. Every slide, my design, my data. He'd even kept my phrasing. I watched from the back row, jaw tight. The younger reps whispered, impressed. "Man, Mark's a genius," one of them said. And then, as if fate wanted to stamp the humiliation deeper, Henderson turned to him and said, "Brilliant work, Mark. You're setting a new standard here." Mark smiled, that hollow grin that once pretended to admire me. Then he glanced across the room, directly at me, and gave a small, mocking nod. A thank you without words. That was it. The trigger. The exact second I stopped being a victim. That night, I didn't sleep. I didn't rage either. I just planned. If he wanted to take credit for my work, I'd take something far more valuable, his credibility. See, Mark's entire reputation was built on the foundation of my relationships. He didn't understand those clients. Not their politics, not their fears, not the small details that made them trust me. He saw them as numbers. I saw them as people. And in sales, people don't stay loyal to numbers. So, I began quietly drawing up a list. The top 10 clients he depended on most, the ones that made his new leadership success look real. All of them had my fingerprints on their contracts. Then I opened my personal contact book, the one I'd built before Pipeline Dynamics, CRM even existed, and sent a few harmless messages. "Hey, it's Ryan. Hope things are going well. How's that new rollout working for you guys? Just checking in. I saw some system changes, wanted to make sure the team's still supporting you properly." Nothing incriminating. Nothing obvious. But every reply reminded me. They still trusted me. For the first time in months, I felt alive again. Every message I got back was a small victory, a reminder of who I was before Mark. One client replied, "Ryan, honestly, since the switch, communication's been off. You were always more thorough. Miss your professionalism." That one line lit a fire under me. The next day, I hit the gym for the first time in months. Not for vanity. For focus. The rage that once consumed me was now being turned into discipline. Cold. Calculated, controlled. By the end of the week, I'd built a plan that could do what HR and corporate politics couldn't: expose Mark's incompetence through his own results. Because the thing about pipelines is, they're only as strong as the trust flowing through them. And I was about to turn off the tap. A few nights later, Lena and I sat on the balcony. She'd been distant, tired of watching me drown in frustration. "Why don't you just quit?" she asked softly. "Because he wins if I do," I said. "Ryan, this company doesn't deserve you." "Maybe not," I said, staring at the skyline. "But the clients do. I built those relationships. They trusted me." "Not the logo." She studied me for a moment. "So what are you going to do?" I smiled faintly. "What I do best. Build a pipeline. Just not for them this time." That's when it hit me. I didn't need the title to have power. I was the pipeline. Every deal, every connection, every piece of trust flowed through me. And that meant I could reroute it wherever I wanted. I started spending less time in meetings and more time listening. Which clients were unhappy? Which ones were growing impatient with Mark's strategic oversight? Who was ready to jump ship if things didn't improve? I didn't approach them directly, not yet. I just gathered information. Small, harmless questions during casual check-ins. But inside, the map of opportunity was forming. I began working later, pretending to support Mark's initiatives, while really monitoring his patterns. The same way he once watched mine. His ego was his weakness. He craved recognition, attention, applause. He'd spread himself too thin, trying to manage accounts he didn't understand. And soon, I'd make sure those cracks showed. By the end of that month, something in my demeanor had changed. The same coworkers who'd once looked at me with pity now whispered, "Ryan's different lately." I walked with purpose again. I smiled more. Even Mark noticed. "Glad to see you finally adjusting," he said one morning, smirking. "Oh, I'm adjusting," I said quietly. "Better than you think." He laughed, oblivious. But I meant every word. Because now, I wasn't just surviving pipeline dynamics. I was rebuilding myself, from the ground up. Every bit of pain, humiliation, and betrayal had turned into momentum. And soon, the same machine that destroyed me would be rebuilt in my image. One evening, as I packed up my laptop, I saw an internal memo flash across my screen. Quarterly Client Retention Review. Leadership presentation next month. Mark Dalton to present data. Perfect. 1 month. That's how long I had to make his empire crumble. Not by sabotage, not by rumor, but by exposure through results. As the elevator doors closed behind me, I whispered to myself, "You took my promotion, Mark. Now watch me take your reputation." And for the first time in a long time, I felt unstoppable. The plan didn't look like a plan at first. It looked like a folder on my laptop labeled, "Notes." Sparse bullet points. Little more than reminders. But underneath each line was a process, surgical, patient, and painfully boring in all the right places. If Mark's game was manipulation through paper and midnight edits, mine would be manipulation through reality. Proof, process, and precisely timed pressure. I wasn't going to yell or storm the CEO's office. I was going to dismantle him where he was strongest, his scoreboard. First, I needed irrefutable logs. Janelle had shown me the edit timestamps, but corporate had shrugged them off. So I became methodical. Every after-hours change, every reassignment, every note, Mark left in the CRM. I archived copies. I exported emails, downloaded versions of proposals, and cross-referenced timestamps with server activity. I created a parallel timeline. When the account moved, what was said to the client that week? Who had the call? Patterns formed. The edits were never accidental, they were choreographed. 2 days before renewals, as I'd suspected. Next, I collected client-side proof. I dug into my personal inbox, my old notes, and the text threads I'd kept with decision makers over the years. I screenshotted messages where clients referenced me by name, or where they asked for my opinion on a feature. Those messages were tiny anchors, human proof that a relationship existed independent of the CRM. Finally, I quietly recorded outcomes. Not illegal voodoo, just careful documentation. Meeting notes, summaries of conversations sent by clients, screenshots of their support tickets that referenced me. If corporate could rewrite the ledger, I'd build one outside their system they couldn't touch. Proof alone doesn't expose anything unless the right people see it at the right time. My next move was theatrical in its restraint. I created a dossier for each target client. A neat, professional packet showing the timeline of interactions, the value I'd delivered, and the suspicious reassignment timestamps. Not accusatory, neutral, objective. If someone was going to accuse Mark, it should look like an audit, not a vendetta. Then I set traps that looked like service gestures. I scheduled health check calls, seemingly casual checks on product rollouts and integration issues. On those calls, I listened for confusion. Clients complained about response times or receiving different information from the team. They used words like slipshod, inconsistent, slow. The exact weaknesses Mark's leadership would reveal. For 2 clients, mid-tier, influential accounts whose renewal windows were critical, I arranged in-person demos under the pretense of mentoring. Mark, hungry for presence and applause, loved the spotlight. He accepted. I drove the agenda but let him present the features. He fumbled on technical nuance he'd never needed to learn. He promised updates he didn't understand. The clients left politely unimpressed. Then I sent follow-up packets. A clean summary email with dates, agreed next steps, and an attached annex for internal reference. Relationship timeline and primary contact history. It was subtle, professional, and impossible to interpret as hostility. But the timeline made the truth obvious to anyone who bothered to read it. Clients started forwarding bits back to me with notes like, "Why wasn't this in our last meeting?" Small seeds. Mark's ego was the easiest thing to weaponize. He wanted credit, visibility, and quick wins. So I created the illusion of both, and watched him walk into the consequence. I leaked a fabricated opportunity to the team, a potential pilot for a big prospect that required fast, confident leadership. I told Mark, privately at first, that I'd prepared the initial pitch kit and offered to rehearse with him. He loved the role. He practiced sound bites I'd written. Then I arranged the pitch to be during a week. He'd scheduled 3 late-night calls, ensuring fatigue and sloppy follow-through. On the day of the demo, Mark overpromised a timeline to the client. He committed to deliverables that required knowledge he didn't have. I made sure the client had direct access to me afterward. When the promised updates failed to arrive, I stepped in. Politely, professionally, with the correct plan and a corrected timeline. The client was relieved and grateful. I sent the corrected plan to them and CC'd the director-level contacts. The email was innocuous, the effect was corrosive. I also used HR's own bureaucracy as a trap. I submitted innocuous process requests, clarifications about client ownership policy, and formal requests for audit logs of specific account changes. HR, eager to maintain paper trails, generated responses that I saved. Each bureaucratic reply reinforced the narrative that the reassignment process was murky and required oversight. All along, Mark performed brilliantly for leadership. He smiled, he presented, and he took applause. Publicly, he seemed unassailable. Privately, he looked tired and increasingly defensive. I began to let details leak into the right inboxes. A client's offhand complaint to a board member. A polite forwarded timeline to a procurement lead. A neutrally worded note to Henderson's assistant about discrepancies in renewal ownership. Nothing dramatic. Just enough friction to make people ask questions. The pressure didn't have to topple him in one gust. It only needed to make the board ask for verification. That's when bureaucracy falters. In the middle of a question, when defensiveness replaces confidence. Mark still strutted around like a man who'd already won. He got the accolades, the dinners with execs, and the loud praise in meetings. He had no idea a careful web was being woven around him. He thought his ascension was permanent. He thought my silence meant acceptance. That arrogance is what made the plan possible. He would keep proving himself with hollow wins, while I quietly collated proof, corrected mistakes, and seeded doubt in human places where spreadsheets couldn't cover lies. By the time quarterly reviews rolled around, my dossier was fat. 10 client timelines, dozens of screenshots, multiple follow-up emails showing corrective steps I'd taken when Mark overpromised. A paper trail outside the CMS, a human trail the CRM couldn't erase. The final move would be surgical, present a concise, undeniable package to the people whose approval mattered. The board members, the procurement heads at our biggest clients, and the one person who could authorize an executive review. I couldn't rush it. One misstep, and I'd look like a disgruntled employee. So I waited. I sharpened. I rehearsed. I watched Mark tighten his schedule to chase the next applause. Because when the time came, he'd still think he was untouchable. And that would be his mistake. The morning of the quarterly review felt like the calm before an explosion. The boardroom was a glass box of artificial light and brass. A stage where reputations were made and buried. Mark arrived in a new suit, hair immaculately set, walk practiced to the beat of applause he expected. He winked at Henderson as if the world were his applause meter. I carried a slim folder. Not bulky. Because subtlety has teeth, and a laptop with a single, clean presentation. Janelle sat 2 rows back, a quiet passenger who'd finally agreed to testify if needed. A few clients were dialed in discreetly. I'd told them, simply, be ready. The meeting started like any other: slides, smiling stats, a quick video about synergy. Mark opened with theatrics. Anecdote, and then rolled into his glossy leadership wins slide. The room clapped on cue. He paced, he gestured, he gave the impression of control. Then it was my turn. I stood up slowly, and the light felt sharper on my face than it had in months. My voice was steady. Good morning, I said. I'd like to present a short addendum to the retention review. Henderson blinked, annoyance flitting across his features. Ryan, you're adding to the agenda. 2 minutes, I said. I promise. The projector switched. Not to glossy charts, but to a single timeline. Neutral font, black on white. It showed client names, dates I'd first contacted them, timestamps of critical interactions, and beside each, the Midnight Edits user, M. Dalton. Reassign account, 11:42 p.m., 2 days before renewal. The room smelled of coffee and suddenly, something colder attention. I didn't accuse, I narrated. I walked people through one client at a time. TechLinks, Vireo, OptiCloud. For each, I read direct quotes from their PMs. We asked for Ryan. We received mixed messages after the switch. I played short audio clips, permissioned recordings of Mark promising deliverables he couldn't explain, and client replies asking for clarification. The files were clinical, factual, impossible to wiggle out of. You could feel the temperature in the room change. Henderson's smile thinned. Mark's hand tightened on his water glass. Then I did something small and devastating. I put up a screenshot of a forwarded email from OptiCloud's procurement head that said, plainly, "We will not renew unless our primary contact returns. Mark's team lacks continuity, silence. The kind that fills stadiums when the hero takes a single, decisive swing." Henderson's voice was brittle. Where did you get this, Ryan? From our clients, I said. From my archives. From the human trail the CRM can't delete. I clicked to the next slide. Janelle's log exports, with IP addresses and timestamps showing Mark's after-hours admin activity. These edits coincide exactly with renewal windows. They retroactively shifted ownership. The commission payouts were adjusted. That's not leadership. That's fraud. Mark rose, face a portrait of practiced outrage. This is defamatory. You're a disgruntled employee trying to make a scene. I handed the folder to the board chair. We don't need emotion. We need verification. Audit these timestamps. Ask the clients. If you want headlines tomorrow, ask procurement at TechLinks. Ask OptiCloud why their legal team requested a point of contact change. Someone, the CFO, I think, opened the folder. His eyes skimmed, then widened. He tapped a number into his phone and spoke into it. Tersely. Within 10 minutes the meeting fractured into urgent side conversations. Messages flew. Henderson called an immediate internal audit. The board requested IT to lock admin privileges pending investigation. Mark's confident posture curdled into defensiveness. But the most cinematic turn came not from corporate, but from the clients themselves. A hush fell as a video window popped up on the screen. The procurement lead from Vireo Systems. Unfiltered and direct. We've been seeing inconsistent information since the account was reassigned, she said. We prefer continuity. We want Ryan back as our point person. We've requested a formal review of the reassignment process. Another client followed. OptiCloud's CTO spoke next, voice tight. We accepted a demo last month where deliverables were overpromised and missed. The vendor should have accountability. Our renewal is contingent on fixing this. It was like watching dominoes learn how to fall. The board could no longer pretend this was office politics. Their scoreboard was bleeding. Mark tried to salvage it with bravado. He called in favors, spun narratives. But the evidence was a mirror. Each lie reflected cleanly, and the reflection didn't match the person in the suit. IT produced logs. HR produced the timeline of my complaint and their non-response. Finance produced a list of retroactive commission edits. The board slotted into the only thing that mattered now: damage control. Henderson's voice was small. We will initiate a formal external review. Effective immediately, Mark Dalton's admin privileges are suspended pending inquiry. We'll freeze related commission payouts until this is resolved. Mark's face registered shock, then fury, then the hollow panic of a man who'd built his life on applause. He groped for explanations. This is a witch hunt. He snapped. He's fabricating. You're suspended, the chair said, final. Security escorted Mark out. Not violently, not needed, but with the ceremonial clarity of a curtain being lowered. People stared as he passed, some with pity, some with the faint thrill of witnessing a fall. He mouthed something indecipherable at me as he left. No threats. No apologies. Only the drain of someone who'd miscounted his luck. Outside the boardroom, the phones lit up. Procurement teams at multiple clients confirmed they'd open reviews. Some sent tentative intents to move accounts back to me should the review validate their concerns. The CFO put a temporary hold on any bonuses linked to the affected accounts. Headlines didn't come that day. They didn't need to. The ripples were already visible in commission forecasts, in investor Q&A prep, in Henderson's stiff text messages. I felt something like vertigo and relief at once. I hadn't sought public blood. I'd sought the truth. The truth had teeth. When the formal review concluded days later, external auditors, client confirmations, server logs cross-referenced, the decision was inevitable. Mark was fired for policy violations and for falsifying account histories. Finance recalculated commissions, some money clawed back, some redirected. The company issued an internal memo about restoring account ownership where appropriate, and quietly reached out to the biggest clients to offer direct patches and points of contact. A week after the fallout, Vario's procurement lead emailed, would like Ryan to resume primary contact, effective immediately. TechLinks followed. OptiCloud scheduled a private workshop with me to rebuild a roadmap. It wasn't a title that came with the corner office, and it wasn't ceremony. It was cleaner direct emails, contracts updated, statements of intent from clients who trusted the person who'd actually built the pipeline. They moved their spend back under my stewardship. The scoreboard changed not because a memo said so, but because the humans who moved numbers did. That evening, I sat alone in the same glass-walled parking lot where, months ago, I'd whispered a vow into the night. Only now the city lights reflected differently. I'd taken something consequential from Mark. Not violence, not ruin for ruin's sake, but the very thing he'd exploited the clients. They returned to the person who'd earned them. My phone buzzed. Lena's name lit the screen. She texted, "You did it." I looked at my hands, still trembling slightly. "We did it," I typed back. And as the city breathed around me, I realized revenge had been less about hurt and more about reclaiming authorship of my life. The climax had broken cleanly. What came next would be about rebuilding. And deciding what I wanted that rebuilding to look like. It's strange how quiet victory sounds. No applause. No spotlight. Just the soft hum of balance being restored. 3 weeks after Mark's firing, the company felt different. Like the air had been replaced. Conversations were sharper. Meetings shorter, laughter less forced. Even Henderson seemed more subdued, suddenly allergic to the politics he'd once encouraged. Mark's office sat empty for a while. His nameplate was gone. But a faint rectangle of clean paint remained where it had been. A ghost of authority. One afternoon, I walked past and caught my reflection in the glass door. For a fleeting second, I thought about stepping in. I didn't. I didn't want his office. I wanted my peace. The audit's findings hit harder than anyone expected. Not only had Mark manipulated CRM records, he'd also diverted renewal bonuses into a shared pipeline reserve that conveniently routed through his team's metrics. Corporate didn't just terminate him. They initiated a full financial recovery review. He lost his severance. His final paycheck was withheld pending legal reconciliation. His professional reputation shattered. Industry whispers travel fast. Within a month, he was unofficially blacklisted from every major firm in the sector. The man who had once hosted conferences about ethical leadership couldn't even secure a consulting gig. Word reached me through a recruiter I knew. He's applying under aliases now. No one's touching him. There was poetic irony in that. He'd spent so long editing my name out of records. Now it was his name that no system wanted to record. Meanwhile, the clients he'd stolen came home. Vireo, OptiCloud, TechLinks, even two smaller firms from his pipeline sent transfer requests back under my portfolio. Not because I asked, but because they'd learned who really built the foundation. When I logged into the CRMs, now monitored by compliance, my dashboard was almost poetic, a lineup of accounts I'd once lost glowing green again, one by one. It wasn't revenge anymore. It was reclamation. I didn't demand the promotion again. I didn't need to. The CEO called me personally 2 months later. "Ryan," she said, "we're restructuring. You'll be leading a specialized client retention division. Full autonomy. Title comes with it this time." I almost laughed. "Pipeline director." "Pipeline director," she confirmed. "But I have a feeling that name's going to mean something different with you in charge." She was right. I didn't hear from Mark directly until a late Tuesday evening. My phone buzzed with an unfamiliar number. Against better judgment, I picked up. His voice was different. Hollow. "You got what you wanted," he said. "Hope you're proud." "I didn't want this, Mark," I said quietly. "I wanted fairness. You built your house on sand. It was always going to sink." He laughed bitterly. "You think you're some kind of hero. You think they'll keep you around. They'll replace you too. They always do." "Maybe," I said. "But they'll remember who actually earned what they replaced." Silence. Then a click. I never heard from him again. 2 months later, someone from HR mentioned he'd filed for bankruptcy. One of his former clients had even sued him personally for misrepresentation. I didn't celebrate. But I won't lie. There was a strange satisfaction in the symmetry. He'd stolen trust to get ahead. In the end, trust was the one currency he couldn't counterfeit. I built my new department differently. No hidden edits. No late night reallocations. Every client interaction logged transparently. Every success shared. When someone on my team got a win, they got the credit. Instantly, publicly, permanently. Because I'd learned something brutal about betrayal. The best revenge isn't destruction. It's reconstruction. Proving you can rise cleanly where others chose shortcuts. One morning, as I was updating our dashboard, I noticed something subtle but perfect. My name was back on every client I'd originally earned. The same digital field Mark had once rewritten now listed Ryan Carter. I stared at it for a long time. Not smiling, just feeling the full circle of poetic justice. He had taken my promotion, but I had taken something he could never replace: my integrity, my relationships, my story. He chased a title. I built a legacy. If you're watching this, maybe you've been there too. Blindsided by someone you trusted, written out of your own story by a smiling thief in a suit. Maybe you stayed silent, thinking the truth didn't matter. Let me tell you something: it does. The truth moves slowly, but it moves. When you're betrayed, don't rush to burn everything. Just start collecting your proof, your strength, and your silence. Because silence, when it finally breaks, can be the loudest revenge of all. Don't stoop to their level. Build higher. Make their downfall look like gravity doing its job. He took my promotion, but I took his future. And in the end, the clients didn't just return to me, they returned to the truth. Have you ever been betrayed at work? By someone who smiled in your face while cutting you down behind closed doors? Tell me in the comments what you'd have done if you were in my place. And if you believe real revenge doesn't need shouting, just precision, hit that subscribe button. Because next time, we're diving into another true corporate betrayal that'll make your jaw drop. So, a story of betrayal, proof, and poetic justice.